computer. So I'm recording it. So people are just going to have to deal with the audio of you now on Facebook. And I gave the whole wide world the Zoom link. So it's just on them to do that. Otherwise, they're just going to have to listen to you. But let me give you a proper introduction, if I can do that. I'm a little bit discombobulated right now. Okay, let me see. No, that's not it. Darn it. Okay, so, no, okay. So, Paul's website is localpower.com. And now there's nobody in the Zoom. There's nobody in the, see. I don't know. He dropped out. There's a storm there. And I don't have his number. Oh goodness, technical difficulties. My mom is there. Hi, Mom. Yeah, Popo. Pee. My daughter is just off screen. We're gonna get this. We're gonna get this right. I should have gotten his phone number. I'm gonna send him an email. Yes.
Always reschedule it if it goes south.
Paul, please call me at 845-464-2245. 2245. All right. I've sent him the email. I think that's Paul now.
That's me, and I think that we're having a thunderstorm and the power keeps cutting out. It keeps rebooting the internet modem.
I got you.
So you want to just carry on the phone, and I'll keep connecting while we talk?
Let's do that. And
okay.
I'm trying to. All right. So let me attempt to give you a bit of a proper introduction. Paul Fenn, the guy I'm speaking on the phone with right now, is a co-author of the nation's landmark 1995 municipal aggregation, and my computer's going crazy. In Massachusetts, authored California's 2002 Community Choice Law, Assembly Bill 111, allowing municipalities to choose alternative electricity providers for their communities. Since then, Paul Fenn has played a leading role in the growth and implementation of CCA across the U.S., as well as development into a new robust program of localization called CCA 2.0. And now, of course, here comes 3.0. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the man, and 7 people watching and listening on the Facebook at least. You've been quoted everywhere for decades. And so tell us, let's cut to the chase. Let's talk about CCA 3.0. And maybe before then, do you want to tell us what community choice aggregation is, just in case some people don't know?
Sure. Yeah, community choice aggregation is an authority that is created by state law. That's like state of New York law, state of California, et cetera. That's in effect in 9 states, but it's all the big states, so it's half of the U.S. energy market, that allows communities at the municipal government level to break away from their utility supplies. So right now, for the past 120 years, you've been receiving power from the same monopoly utility, and whatever company acquired the wires that deliver to your home or business automatically had that monopoly position. And then there was deregulation back in the 90s, and that created a degree of competition, but it didn't really work. So most people are still pretty much stuck with, just what they get, and they pay for what they get. Maybe they have some choice, but usually it's kind of limited. So community choice aggregation said, why not just break away at the community level? So a whole municipality, everybody inside the municipality that's the, the residents, the businesses, government, everybody, to select what kind of electricity and or heating supply they want to have. And so that started out in that basic description, and which was back in the 1990s, and then the 2.0 you mentioned added on a new layer, which I developed 20 years ago and kind of came to fruition in the past 10 years, and mostly in California. And that was saying, why don't we use that position of control to actually build new renewable energy facilities to serve us, so we aren't just buying from the same old players on the market, where there's lots of market gaming, there's a lot of fake green power. We say we want to actually achieve physical new green power in the community. So that's what 2.0 did. In California, we pulled that off, and there are now 20 aggregations serving 10 million Californians and 170 cities. And then across the rest of the country, you have that sort of earlier, older form of CCA that is really just buying power. And that's in effect in about 1,300 cities in 7 other states. So New York just adopted CCA law, and partly I developed 3.0 for New York. Here, I'm coming on again. I can put this down. I guess you can probably hear me okay.
I have an idea, because there's hardly anybody on the Zoom. Is there any chance that can I call you? I see the 413-268 and the 4 digits. Can I call you, and then we could do FaceTime? Because I just want people to be able to see you while you're talking.
Sure. The problem is I'm not using a cell phone.
Oh, okay.
On a computer and a landline phone.
Okay. You don't have an iPhone or a smartphone?
I live on a farm. We don't have a cell phone service.
I found you. Well, you know what it is? I'm just going to put the Zoom link in the chat here, and then the 7 people that are watching on Facebook hopefully will just join the Zoom. So I apologize for interrupting. And
no.
So 5 years ago, Paul Fenn of localpower.com here spoke. I think Manager Joe Green of Clearwater was the moderator. Citizens for Local Power over the last decade or so, and a lot has happened. There's a number of cities, towns, and villages in Dutchess County and the Hudson Valley that are pursuing this or have already signed agreements. Fishkill, Beacon, Red Hook, I think maybe City Poughkeepsie, and probably a bunch in Ulster County that I'm not aware of. And but can you tell us why it's so important to think and work for CCA 3.0 as opposed to just community choice aggregation 1.0 or 2.0?
Yeah, it's really climate change. So the original idea was that if we gave communities control of their energy supply, they could solve climate change. And of course, that's 25 years ago. And within 5 years, we realized that wasn't going to do it, that buying power is just too limited, buying green power, because the market always is dominated by the bottom feeders. And so you've got this big wave of renewable energy certificates being used that the states were allowing to be marketed as green power, even though they're just pieces of paper. And so a lot of the cities that wanted to go green didn't really understand that buying renewable energy certificates doesn't make your physical power green. And so if you want to actually solve climate change, you need to stop buying power that involves combustion. But if you buy green power that is allowed to be defined by these certificates, you don't get any greenhouse gas reductions from that. So you could have 100% renewable energy and have the same amount of carbon emissions from your electricity supply as someone who has 0% renewable energy. And that's something that's very hard for people to understand, but we learned that experience and we shifted into 2.0, which is saying, let's build it. That way, if we build it, will cause what we call additionality. We're adding new wind farms onto the grid, new solar, and so that itself, that'll cause actual carbon reduction because you're sourcing new physical, renewable, local generation. Now, 3.0 was our next insight, which was realizing any resources on the grid don't cause as much greenhouse gas reduction as solar on your roof or efficiency measures in your building, your house, your business, or battery storage in the urban core, or electrification and the use of renewables for building heat. And the reason is that the grid is a financial infrastructure. And so when a wind farm is built on the grid, it only generates power when the wind blows. Same with solar. That's 20% of the time, 30% of the time. And so every time
Uh-oh.
so anyhow, I'm back, I guess. I think I'm still, can you hear me still?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So the issue is that whenever you build a wind farm or a solar farm, you still have, you're building 20, 30% generation in terms of the 24/7 need for electricity. And so every time there's a big wind farm, there ends up being a gas plant built on the same transmission line. So otherwise, the transmission line as a financial entity is losing money in a big way. And so you have this constant backfilling of renewables that is inherently involved in centralized approach to renewables. So the 3.0 model said, how do we get into an end game where we actually solve climate change? And so we set up this model where the community will physically localize most of their resources onto buildings. And will, in order to do that, they have to be able to not export power they're generating when their buildings are empty. And so they need to be able to store the electricity that the solar panels generate, for example, in something. And one of those can be batteries, but those are expensive. So we look at less expensive things that are more cost effective, like heating, like air conditioning, like hot water. Those energy consumers are burning all day. Right? Your water heater is just going on and off, whether you're at home or not. Your heating systems are on and off, whether you're at home or not. And so they can absorb the excess power, and you can save money on heating instead of just on electricity plug load. And if to the extent that you can incorporate electric vehicles and use those as storage, people already pay for their electric vehicles or for their vehicles, so it's not really an additional cost. You can just use a vehicle as a storage medium. So we started seeing this vision of using what are called microgrids in a general model in urban areas to enable what we call a non-exporting strategy that subtracts demand from the grid instead of exporting onto it and importing from it constantly, which is pretty much the system that we have.
Amen. Now, haven't you kind of made yourself a little bit the enemy of the investor-owned utilities?
Yeah. Well, yes, I did that. I was called that. Bloomberg said I was public enemy number one a couple of years ago. Fortunately, they're not really entirely in charge anymore. I mean, that's the one advantage of deregulation, was that they don't have as much control as they used to have. And part of the reason that there was an opening to do these things was that they lost that control. They are also scrambling to find a position in an evolving technological landscape. In other words, it's called grid defection, which is happening quite a bit with the rapidly declining cost of solar photovoltaics and batteries. So in some ways, I think they see a brick wall coming at them, and they're beginning to be more cooperative in relation to CCAs. They're beginning to find ways to sort of cut the baby in half or take part of the functionality of local generations to support their systems, to make their grids more resilient. So there's some examples out there of what are called bilateral contracts, where a CCA will sign up for the power from a local solar array, and the utility will sign up for the ability to turn it on or export onto the grid, or not export onto the grid, depending on grid conditions. So I do think there's a future in which the entities might be able to cooperate to a certain extent, and I'm definitely not trying to take down the utilities. I'm not that's not my goal. For me, the goal is, how do you get, we right now have only another decade really to launch transformational change in energy. I've been doing this now for 30 years, and so I realize how resistant to change this industry is, and if we wait too much longer, you're getting into the point of no return zone, and where we will not be able to make the change. I think there's an over-reliance on crisis and the idea that somehow the climate crisis will automatically kill fossil fuels and save us, but really it doesn't really work that way. We need to have leverage to make changes intentionally, and if we wait until collapse occurs, we won't have the capacity, I don't think, to make those changes. So that's my goal, just to get leadership to happen now. I think really the main barrier to climate action, climate mobilization, is a lack of example. And there tends to be this approach to climate action, which is shepherding. How are we going to get everyone to do it all at once? But CCA experience wasn't everyone doing it at once. It was one jurisdiction taking some leaps, succeeding, and immediately copied by dozens, hundreds of other jurisdictions. It's just that leadership's really so hard to happen, because everyone looks for others to lead, frankly, and including the politicians, including a lot of activists who say they want to lead, but when it comes down to leading, they say, well, have you done this before? That's always the question I get. Have you done this before? If that's the question, no one will ever do it. And so that's what we do at Local Power, is looking for the communities that really see that brick wall. They're willing to use their heads, not just imitate precedent, because there are no precedents for climate mobilization.
Amen. We're speaking with Paul Fenn, the father, the godfather, the founder, the inventor of the concept of community choice aggregation. It looks like there may be nobody on the Facebook live stream, but at least there's 5 of us, you, me, and Jessica Clegg of citizensforlocalpower.org, Joshua Duck, amazing attorney at law, Esquire, lawyer from Millerton, Northeast. Jessica, did you have something you wanted to say? Or Joshua, did you have something you wanted to say? Or anybody else? All right.
Just Paul, it's great to hear from you again, and appreciate your involvement in the ongoing CCA process in the Hudson Valley, and paying some attention here, where we're very actively trying to engage some community folks in the in getting on board some kind of programming that we hope that will continue having you as an ally.
Oh, you can count on it. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much.
And you're back in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah. I really realized, actually, when Jess and others at Citizens for Local Power contacted me and brought me out to New York in 2014, and that I think the front has moved. The California was the front, and now there's been a lot of success, but I just didn't feel really needed there. And I feel like New York and Massachusetts and some other New England and Northeast states are really the place to do this now. And really 3.0 isn't just to do what California did, because it isn't really enough, but to take I think in a way, clearer political thinking and realization because of the number of things. Part of it is you have a highly educated populations, but also you had the hurricanes, you've had the severe impacts hit the East Coast, and there's more consciousness of palpable danger here. So yeah, we moved out here back. I mean, I started in Massachusetts and back in the early 90s, but we decided to come back. So we moved to Western Mass. So we're about an hour from Albany.
Nice. You're an hour east of Albany or southeast? Or?
East.
Yeah, we're just like, I don't know, half hour north of west, northeast of Pittsfield.
Is there any legislation that New York State really needs to pass to take advantage of CCA? That's number one. And number two, just playing devil's advocate. Oh, easy to make 3.0 happen in Sonoma County, California, but New York State doesn't have as much sunlight. What do you say to that devil's advocate? Those two questions.
Well, it just means, you know, solar isn't the only solution, right? I mean, the basic principle here is not solar. Solar is a really important resource because it's so insanely cheap, because it is so easy to install, so modular. So, you know, on the East Coast, you put up more panels, right? Panels are cheap now. The cost of the solar system is not mostly the panels. It's the what it takes to find the customer, and that's true in California. Half the cost of installed solar in California, half, is so-called customer acquisition cost. Half. You pay a $50,000 system, $25,000 covering the cost that the installer carry find you, and so not panels. Panels are now below $1 a watt. It's crazy, so cheap. And so you just put more panels up, you know, when you have less sun. And where I live here is 20% less solar, so-called insolation, which is the amount of photons that hit a solar panel less, than California. So you put up 20% more or 30% more panels. But it's not, it's the minor part of the cost of the system, apart from the wiring, inverter, and all that. So beyond that, the principle here isn't just solar. When you look at a community, you're looking at what is there, right? So, for example, here you're on the Hudson, here where we have the Connecticut River. You have lots of smaller rivers. Hydro, small hydro is a widely underutilized resource. Waste heat, another widely underutilized resource. I mean, the amount of waste heat that is going on is pretty much shocking, and it just goes right out the pipe. You also have small wind. You have, as I said, you have appliance automation is a critical resource, and that's true in any building, right? Your appliances are essentially 1950s technology or 1910 technology called a wall switch. And it's on when you turn it on, it's off when you turn it off, and it's pretty absurd. And so automation of appliances, electrification of heat, use of heat pumps, air source heat pumps, mini splits, ground source heat pumps are more costly. Urban areas where you have the ability to put in heat loops down the street and have multiple houses and buildings share the heat loops are very cost effective. So it's really a question of looking at the resources and the patterns of energy usage and the nature of energy use in a community that determine how you're going to approach technology rather than just solar. But even the way that you would approach technology would be based on adapting it to local conditions.
We're speaking with Paul Fenn of localpower.com, the inventor, originator, granddaddy of the whole concept of community trace aggregation. What was the other question? New York State, does New York State need to pass? I think Citizens for Local Power was instrumental in getting 1 or 2 laws passed already. Does the New York State legislature need to do anything else to make CCA 3.0 reality, or it's all been done?
3.0 was designed for the current environment in New York and Massachusetts, which are very similar. Massachusetts and New York have very similar structures. And there was the reasoning there was California, the way we got the leap in 2.0 involved some heavy lifting. And it was important to demonstrate the feasibility of it, but it didn't make it so easily to replicate in other states. Specifically, that in New York, you have rules that prevent essentially large agencies from forming that act like utilities. In CCA, in California, pardon me, the CCAs were allowed to set aside revenue, for example, and so that they could build up an investment grade credit rating, and they could issue bonds and make long-term investments and this sort of thing. Every other state in the U.S. doesn't have that kind of structure. So we wanted to adapt a model that would work in the way that New York is designed to work. And 3.0 is designed to be, it just works really differently from 2.0 and 1.0. And it's made for towns or cities that don't have a lot of money. Maybe they're not eager to issue green bonds or really get very heavily involved in the power business. Instead, the 3.0 model focuses local governments on the capacity that they already have, and which would be described essentially as redevelopment. So a localization process, unlike a centralized utility model, which is like in California, which is committing large facilities worth, say, tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars in 30-year power contracts, right? So those are worth billions of dollars in single contractual agreements. The 3.0 model involves smaller facilities that are built, again, on homes of buildings. So we're talking about, $1 million to $10 million facilities. And these facilities are going to end up being owned by the people in those buildings, not by the government. And so it's a redevelopment model where the municipality, the municipal government takes the center role. Instead of a new startup agency with a big credit line, it's the municipal government helping to actively develop these resources in their communities, in businesses and homes, and using the CCA service as an engagement platform on which to make that happen. So it kind of redesigns it so that instead of having one big wheel that's running everything, you line up a smaller wheel, the smaller CCA program, with a municipality, and so that it's driving some of the processes, particularly to engage local residents and businesses. But then engaging those local residents and businesses, they're carrying some weight because they're being enabled to participate voluntarily in investments in these new resources. And then local businesses are being used to build and develop these resources. So you're using more local resources to make these things happen instead of having it be all one new agency doing everything. That's why it can work in New York or Massachusetts. It doesn't need a mega agency to do massive, billion-dollar contracts.
Amen. Joshua Esquire at Law, he asks, how do you think the convergence of the dramatic drop in price and demand might affect the future short, middle, and long term of renewable energy?
Let me make sure I understand that. Was it that the recent fluctuation in fuel prices?
I think that's what he's asking about, yeah.
Is that what he's asking about?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, it's a good question. It's been coming up lately. Yeah, the price of gas has gone down, the markets, so all the gas-fired power, price of commodity markets are saying, how can we do this right now? The price is low. That's true. I've been doing this though for 30 years, and prices in the market go like that, right? They fluctuate, and so you have to be sensitive to the market when you make decisions and do things. but you also don't want to make policy decisions based on those fluctuations, because energy planning takes, decades into the future. To implement it effectively, you have to go long. And so you make long-term strategic decisions. You respond to short-term market fluctuations tactically, but you don't make strategic decisions based on fluctuations. Or else you just become a basket case, because alternately, when the price of gas gets really high, you make other decisions because it's high, and low because it's low. You become like a day trader that always loses every time the market shifts, because you're always behind the drivers of the market. So it's better to go long, and the long-term trend is objective, right? After the shakeout occurs, the main effect of the shakeout is going to be the fracking industry is collapsing. Guess what happens to the price of gas when the supply of gas drops? The price goes up again. And so you just have to anticipate this and not be sort of spooked from seeing the overall trajectory and pattern and planning accordingly.
What if you're already a basket case?
If you're already what?
Basket case.
I sympathize. I pretty much am too. So I'm speaking from my padded room here in Massachusetts, and so
stuff in the background there. Maybe we'll get to that. So Joshua Douglas says, and the potential for long-term drop in demand as the economy has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Those are other comments.
Yes. Yeah, and that is certainly possible. That it's possible that we'll all starve to death next year, right? It's possible that we're all going to die. Nevertheless, I guess the way I approach that is, it's like when people ask me, well, what if it's too late, climate change? What's the point of decarbonizing if, it's too late? It's a waste of money. We should just all buy like dinghies and lots of mosquito spray. And my answer to them is, whether you want to localize energy and do what's called the Green New Deal for carbon reasons or for adaptation reasons, pretty much involves doing the same things, right? Which is that we need to establish a new economic foundation, and we need it to involve less importation of resources. That action will also decarbonize the economy. And so for whatever our motive might be, we need to establish a new economic foundation, and we need to establish resilient local energy systems that are the foundation of that new economy. And so that's really what this 3.0 idea is about, and that's why we call it the local Green New Deal, that it isn't just about decarbonizing or going solar or even going local, but it's about changing the structure of the energy economy so that we can establish, some people call the circular economy, right, where there is a shift not just of the location of the generation, but of the ownership structure of the generation. And not merely the ownership structure, but also the labor structure, right? We want to get local sourcing. We want to establish local labor sourcing and local ownership and local finance. So the 3.0 model includes all these elements that are, whose goal is to establish an authentically autonomous economic foundation, starting with energy. At the same time, to be commercially salient, not just a utopian dream, but something you can actually do right now in the current market under current law, and something that you can do at scale if you have the political will. So I think, that Joshua's right. There's a lot of volatility. Also, that it's possible that that the new economic situation is long-term, and we really don't know what that's going to be like. But I would wager, I personally wager, that in any scenario, we're going to need these things. And the sooner that we act on them, the more likely that we'll have the ability to establish versus waiting, in which case we end up, eating dog food and waiting around for someone to save us.
Amen. We've been listening to and watching Paul Fenn of localpower.com, the founder of the whole concept of community choice aggregation. You were talking about making sure that we're not importing everything. I know that Jen Metzger, who was one of the founding members of citizensforlocalpower.org, Rosendale Town Board member. Now she's a great liberal, progressive leading light in the New York State Senate. She's been saying for years that 70% of the energy spent, the money spent on energy in Ulster County just flows out of Ulster County, 70%. I'm guessing that's what it is in Dutchess County and most places. I just wanted to, it sort of reminds me how a week or two ago I interviewed on little daily live stream show Michael Schumann, who's kind of a internationally known sort of local first economist. This whole concept of LOIS, LOI, locally owned import substitution. So it's all in line, and the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, all their work.
Yep.
If I promise not to stalk you, can you tell us what city you're living in Massachusetts and like which, because I'm sure you're turning it upside down already. So it's going to be like the cutting edge municipality in Massachusetts. I just want to have like which city, town, or village in New York State or Massachusetts is just kicking ass and taking names. Like I want to be able to, I think I saw Northampton, Massachusetts. There was something, I did a Google image search. But which municipality in Massachusetts or New York State is just kicking ass and taking names? And that's the model for the country. Or are we really talking about Sonoma County, California? Or what? How would you respond?
Well, I'm in Haydenville, which is town of 2,000, right outside of Northampton. And I've been working with the city of Northampton for the past year on this new articulation of the so-called CCA 3.0 model. So you can find that document. It's, in fact, if you go to our website, it's on there, and it's got Northampton's logo on it. It's, go to localpower.com and you can order a free copy. So Northampton is definitely going to be on the cutting edge. They've combined with some of the other local cities and towns here, Amherst, they call it Amherst, and Pelham. So there's a group here, and they're forming what's imagined to be in the future a countywide CCA, maybe 2 counties. So there's a Hampshire County, Franklin County, possibly Hamden County. I don't know. Springfield's down there, so that's the big city around here. And then you have Cambridge, Massachusetts, it's outside of Boston. And they are noteworthy in Massachusetts for very cutting edge climate policy. They are threatened in the way I was describing. They've got real kind of exposure to climate, flooding, and heat. Right now they have 1 week per year in deadly heat waves, and they are expecting 3 months a year in about 20, 30 years. So it's kind of extreme forecasting on the coast. And so they're seeing that as really menacing, and they have very comprehensive policies and goals. And so I think they've focused their CCA, which is called the Cambridge Energy Alliance, on physical localization as opposed to buying green power, as opposed to being 100% renewable, which is, again, this legalistic definition where you buy credits, but your actual power supply is totally unchanged. They said, forget that, we want to build local. And so they've been building local, and they're ramping up now, and they have very ambitious goals. So I think Cambridge will be something to watch. And otherwise, New York, obviously you have Ulster, where Jessica Clegg is working with Citizens for Local Power. That I think is going to be an important CCA. And then you have the Capital Corridor CCA, which is Albany and Troy and surrounding 4 counties now, and they're growing. I think they're going to be important. There's Westchester County is doing really great things too. So I think you've got a really strong foundation already. In some ways, I think you have a clearer policy kind of 0 point, ground than California has. I mean, California, yeah, everyone's an environmentalist in California, but they're just more superficial about it. They're not scared. And I think people in the East Coast are scared. We got to do something, and you can feel it because you've had enough disasters here, and you felt it not just in flooding and weather events, but also in economic events. But now you've been the hardest hit and so is Massachusetts, by the COVID. And so it's like there's real things happening here, and and there's a more palpable sense that if you don't prepare for these things, you're going to pay. And I think that's a good motivator. I mean, and with all his faults, the governor here that you have, I should say, has had, however imperfect in execution, has had fairly clear thinking on goals, right? So that when he ordered CCA in the state of New York, he ordered it as a platform for localization. That hadn't happened before. And so you do have that. You do have this sort of realization, even in the governor's office, that you need to localize your energy supplies. And it's not just a visionary idea, it's a practical strategy that's, I think, is widely accepted there. So it's just at this point a matter of how you're going to do it. And 3.0 is designed so you don't have to be like Sonoma. You don't have to be like some of these California cities or counties that have been, created new agencies that do it all themselves and everyone's going green and it's hunky-dory. But instead, a lot of towns that have really limited resources and they're focused on just surviving and having a localization agenda that works in that world and not just in the world of happy, shiny people.
Amen. Once again, we're with Paul Fenn, Fenn, of localpower.com, the granddaddy, grandpappy, originator, founder, inventor of
the Holy Ghost.
Community choice aggregation. It's funny you brought up the Cambridge Energy Alliance because I was a member of the Dutchess County Legislature for 15 years. And back in 2008 and 2009, I was actually part of the majority. So I was the environmental committee chair for a couple of years there. And I don't think I knew about CCA. Actually, I think I got the resolution passed for MEGA, the Municipal Energy Gas Alliance, which is not really, I think, renewable at all. It was megaenergy.com or megaenergy.org. I think it was something that Tompkins County, the New York State Association of Counties, was promoting. But I saw something on PBS, I think in 2008 or 2009, that blew my mind. It was a piece on the Cambridge Energy Alliance. And actually, I think it was 2008. And so I actually got a resolution passed in the county legislature in Dutchess County, and it was like 22-3. I got a bunch of Republicans to vote for it, for a Dutchess County version of the Cambridge Energy Alliance. And then I helped facilitate, we had a whole bunch of meetings. We had folks from the Dutchess County Department of Planning, Cornell Cooperative Extension of Dutchess County out there in Millbrook, and we had Sustainable Hudson Valley and a whole bunch of different groups and the best and brightest, some of the best and brightest environmental minds. David Dell, who now is, Luminary Publishing and the Chronogram magazine, he crunched the numbers. He figured out, because the Cambridge Energy Alliance at that point was all about energy efficiency. He crunched the numbers and figured out the 110,000 homes in Dutchess County, if they had energy efficiency, forget about the solar or the wind power or the renewable, just let's seal up the cracks, right? So in the summer, the hot air doesn't get in, and in the winter, the cold air doesn't get in, right? Just that alone, he said, would save $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion on energy and electricity bills over the course of a decade. So the whole idea, the dream of it, was to get a Dutchess County version. And we got the resolution passed 22-3, and we had all these meetings, but it just never got off the ground. The Dutchess County Planning Commissioner himself, Roger Akeley at the time, he told me privately he loves the idea. But that was like, I got 30 different resolutions passed in those 2 years. And basically, the county executive wouldn't allow any of them to be implemented. I got a resolution passed for Dutchess County to be a DEP climate smart community. And it's only a couple of years ago they actually implemented it. And then the county executive has this task force, best and brightest in Dutchess County now. We're not working on CCA, we're not working on a plan to make Dutchess County fossil fuel free, but I'm glad to hear, please, the Cambridge Energy Alliance again. There's a bunch of things I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to ask, wanted to talk about, is CCA and also, are you for it, Jessica? Some municipalities? Is Jessica, you still there?
Are we trying to work with municipalities?
Or are you trying to do it countywide or town by town in Ulster County?
I think countywide would be ideal. Obviously, there's a lot up in the air at the moment with the current state of, where funding is coming from. But yeah, the goal would be countywide to allow people to opt out if they didn't want to, but that oversight would be beneficial in our minds.
Is it possible for a county to do that and say, hey, Ulster County CCA is happening, or only, and opt out if you want, or only a municipality can do that? Is it possible for a county to do that? Or is it really New York State home rule law that a city, town, or village can do the CCA? Because, of the local residential opt-out. Does anybody know that?
In my understanding, as long as there's an opt-out clause, I think you can do it.
On a county level?
Others may have differing feedback.
Paul, could you talk about green bonds? I see that you actually, Bernie mother-loving Sanders included, or Robert Pollin's Green New Deal was included in Bernie Sanders. Could you talk about this whole idea of a local Green New Deal, the Green New Deal, green bonds, and can Dutchess County do that? Can Ulster County do it? Can a town, the teeny tiny little town of Clinton, where my mom still lives in northern Dutchess County, there's 4,500 people. Rhinebeck has 500 people. Can a little town like that do a green bond? And what is a green bond?
There was a little feedback there, but I think I got it. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. The green bond is a revenue bond, just like a bond that would be used to fix a bridge or build a bridge, build a hospital, be used for building things. It can be used for maintaining things. If you have a revenue source as a government, and then you can issue bonds without having to raise taxes, right, or to expose the general fund of the town. And so, to the extent that you have a secure revenue source, you can issue bonds. So it's easier to issue bonds when you have sufficient threshold of value in a bunch of projects. And so the trick with smaller towns and with smaller projects is to have lots of them, and to have them, like Jess was talking about, have them organized on a wider basis so that you have a greater amount of revenue in the agreements. The green bonds are essentially revenue bonds for solar, for renewables, for carbon reducing infrastructure. And they're currently, I think it's $200 billion a year industry worldwide. So for these CCAs in New York or Massachusetts, green bonds are going to be usable for purposes of financing renewable energy facilities in buildings in which the occupants are going to participate as the voluntary investors in those projects. And as opposed to California, where the bonds are issued by agencies based on their aggregate revenues. So one of the issues in New York that we're dealing with in 3.0 design is that the New York State Public Service Commission created a rule prohibiting the CCAs from setting aside revenue for this purpose. They said that you should not, the CCA should not do that, meaning that they cannot establish a business grade credit rating, investment grade credit rating, and issue bonds or make these kinds of investments. So it's one of the barriers we're dealing with. But a bond vehicle, nevertheless, is just, it could be issued on a single project basis, right? A single project that generates revenue is the basis for bonds. And it just comes down to what is the cost of money. So a lot of people come back and say, well, why don't you just use commercially available investment instead of using a green bond? And the answer is that it goes back to that issue about market exposure, that if you go to the commercial market to get financing for your solar, the first question they ask you is, what's your credit rating? And if you don't have the adequate credit rating, you don't qualify for the loan. And so in the case of climate action, in order to achieve the kind of carbon reduction that are called for by the UN and by the Paris Accord and various international organizations that set targets, you can't exclude people with credit scores under 650. I mean, that's the majority of the population. That any strategy that depends on private credit will not bring about scaled change. Those are effectively limited to, if not the 1%, to 10%. And so you have a 10% solution. If you don't use public finance, you have a 10% solution. But if you do use public finance, you have a 100% solution, potentially. You have to put structure into the investments so that bonds can be issued on those investments. But you're not limited to those with 650 credit score. And so anyway, that's the approach we took, was just, this is an end game strategy that says, let's stop making these sorts of what I would consider to be neoliberal arguments about what's efficient. You know, it's more efficient for General Motors to outsource the parts of its cars to 600 locations in 70 countries. It's efficient for them to do that. It results in a cheaper car. But is that a way to make a car?
Right.
If you want to solve climate change, you can't have this outsourcing mentality that says, just use the private market, you know, do what everyone else is doing, but do it faster. So they're doing it as fast as they can. It's not working, you know. And so the idea that it's working is part of the problem. I mean, the thing about controversy around Mike Moore's film, I thought was really telling, because you had so many people saying, you know, he's attacking us. You know, who said that climate action is working? It's pretty funny. Why would environmentalists become defensive about the statement that it is not working? It's not working. We need to declare emergency. The market's not adequate, right? We need to wake up. And it's not that Michael Moore had a correct critique of what's not working. It was incorrect, inaccurate, it was unprofessional, whatever. But it's not working. And that was my answer with green bonds. Yeah, it's like complicated, but we need to do it.
With Paul Fenn of localpower.com, let me ask a stupid question. Maybe the other 3 or 4 people watching or listening know this, but you said that New York State is ripe for CCA 3.0, and yet you also said the New York State Public Service Commission unfortunately issued this ruling that cities, towns, and villages, counties, whatever, municipalities are not, or CCAs cannot set aside funds, you know, for a business grade credit rating or an investment grade credit rating. So does that hamstring CCA 3.0 in New York State until we get legislation or the PSC to turn that around?
No, I mean, CCA 3.0 was designed for that restriction. So we're just saying, okay, let's not have the strategy that we had in California of setting aside revenue in a centralized agency and using that as the basis for investment. It didn't work that well anyway. They still most of them still went out to the private commercial investment market, which is all tax avoidance. You know that, right? The entire renewable energy finance industry is financed by billionaires who are avoiding taxes. And that's why they're making those funds available for investments. So, you know, the cheapness of their credit is based upon the fact that they're not paying for government services. It's another version of Walmart. And so there's such an ingrained tendency in the thinking of just government, but environmentalists, that's efficient, that you should go to the billionaires, that you should have the billionaires finance everything. We need to disengage from that anyway. And so setting aside revenue at a mega agency wasn't really the solution anyway. And we need essentially what's called microfinance, right? Microfinance. In India, you can get a $50 loan, you know. And so we're talking about, at this point, a $5,000 loan, a $10,000 loan, or if you're going for a home, for an individual, you know, single family home, but if you're going to a urban core on commercial buildings, government buildings, we're talking about a $5 million to a $25 million loan. And so that's the upper end. You're not going to go bigger than $25 million on a single facility. You're going to, most of your units are going to be focused on medium-sized buildings, and they're going to be like $5 million bucks. And so you're looking at redevelopment of the urban core in units of $5 million. And so how many medium-sized buildings do you have in Kingston? You have a few hundred, or I don't know, thousands. So 1,000 times 5 million. That's a lot of money.
I came up with this idea. It's sort of nutty. I just thought I'd float it. I don't know if I could get any elected official anywhere to actually push this, but I was thinking, if you're a bank and you have a branch in a certain town, then you have a responsibility to help create basically the local Green New Deal. Otherwise, you're not allowed to have a branch of your bank in that town. Because the whole sticking point has been, I mean, remember, what was it, 1973, 1974, the OPEC oil embargo? And, you know, it wasn't just that we were supposed to all conserve and go energy efficient. It was also we were going to go renewable. We were going to go green. And I'm 56. I don't know how old you are, but
54.
Yeah, so I'm actually older than you. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know if that could ever fly anywhere, but just I see Wells Fargo branches all over in downtown Portland. I mean, we're in Lake Oswego, which is a southern suburb of Portland, Oregon, and there's this massive skyscraper of Wells Fargo. And of course, Wells Fargo and J.P. Morgan Chase are two of the worst banks. So I just get frustrated because I think everybody really wants to go green. Everybody wants solar or geothermal or, you know, a super insulated home. It's just so hard to make it happen. Let me ask you this: these frack gas power plants. The Michael Moore film featured it to a certain extent. In Dover, which is right across the border there from Connecticut, which is eastern Dutchess County. They've just about finished constructing an 1,150 megawatt frack gas power plant. And then in Orange County, which is just a little bit, I guess, west of Ulster County, there's a 650 megawatt frack gas power plant that just fired up a couple years ago, CPV. And so a lot of my environmentalist friends back there in the Hudson Valley are still fighting those. And actually, Joshua Douglas, I still see he's on the call, is really in the thick of it, in the battle. And so eastern Dutchess County, maybe not so far away from, where are you? Haydenville, Massachusetts. So don't be surprised if it's not just me, but if Joshua tries to maybe rope you in and pull you in into I don't know, doing some sort of a Zoom meeting or whatever, because I think sometimes some of the best ways, you probably know this a lot better than I do, one of the best ways to fight all the pollution crap is to obviously point out, there's another way to do it. There's another way to get our energy. So yeah, if you go to stopcricketvalley.org, that's Dover. That's Eastern Dutchess County. That's the 1,150 megawatt frac gas power plant. And I see Joshua Douglas is still on the call. I'm pretty sure he'd be thrilled. He actually just asked me a couple days ago, because I'm still in touch. I'm 2,500 miles away, but I'm trying to stay in touch a little bit. He wanted to know from me, like some progressive economists. Well, you worked with Robert Pollin on basically Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal plan, right?
Well, I talked with him about it, and he put it in. So I guess you'd say it worked on it.
Qualifies. Anyway, don't be surprised if Joshua Douglas reaches out to you, because
I would love to. More power to you, Joshua. I mean, those are the fights of our time, and I agree that one of the great, particularly when you're in the permitting phase, having alternatives out there is a really powerful way to fight the projects. So we've done a lot of work with Committees for a Better Environment on gas-fired power plants and presenting alternatives as part of the alternatives analysis during the permitting phase. So it's a really valuable thing, and I've done a lot of work in fighting gas. I did a lot in California. In fact, I did the big anti-gas filing for when they were building the LNG terminals. Well, obviously, which have now been reverse engineered for export, right? All those LNG terminals that they're building 20 years ago for import have all been retooled for export. They were saying, we got to have this stuff or we're all going to go dark. So I did a huge filing on that, and we lost. So one of the things I lost was the fight against gas. But on the power plant level, we've been quite successful at stopping power plants. And it's, I think it's just really important for people to realize that there are alternatives, and that they can go to scale. I mean, part of the tricky part is these facilities when they're built, even the renewable facilities, mostly that are built now, are built for export. So they're not building the power plant to serve your community. The power plants they're just sacrificing your air and your groundwater, or around the region's groundwater, for someone else's power. And a lot of the renewables where I am here, there are 40-acre photovoltaic arrays littered all around here. Not one of them is powering the local communities. It's a commodity business. And that's where, that's what has to change. That localization means saying, no, this is where we live, and if there's power generation here, it's going to be for us, and we want it to be renewable. And so enough of this stuff. We got to stop doing that kind of stuff. And that's the real turnaround. That's where the rubber hits the road. So Joshua, wherever you are, I think it's really important.
He has a call this week with Steve Engelbright, who I guess is the chair of the New York State Assembly's Oversight Committee on the DEC, and Tony Ingrafia from Cornell University, and James Hansen, the NASA scientist. You want in on that call?
Hell yeah. I mean, if I can contribute, at least I'll listen. I'll contribute if I can.
All right. So there you go. So Joshua Douglas will, I'll put you guys in touch, and I'll
okay. Perfect.
By email.
All right.
Don't forget about me, okay?
Why'd you move?
It's a long story. Basically, my we still, is anybody watching it right now? My wife decided that she wanted to have the baby out on the West Coast and be closer to her mom and her family and her son. And there's some other things that happened. But I decided it'd be a good idea to be with her. And our baby is amazing. She is Sequoia. I'm 56. This is the first time I'm having a kid. And she's going to be 1 year old on 1 year old this Friday. So
hey, mazel tov.
Thank you. So I guess we'll end it there. Talk about subsidies. Cricket Valley got $100 million in tax breaks through the Dutchess County Industrial Development Agency. Just like, and there's actually a Democrat who's the Dutchess County Comptroller who a couple years ago released a whole analysis of the two like Dutchess County Economic Development Agencies, the Dutchess County Industrial Development Agency, the Dutchess County Local Development Corporation. But can you imagine that? This 1,150 megawatt frac gas power plant got $100 million in tax breaks. And the sad thing is, I know you've been involved in stopping the permitting. CPV plant, you know, Joe Percoco, ZD, and all that corruption in Orange County, the 650 megawatt power plant, and the 1,150 megawatt power plant, the one that's closer to you in Dover, they've gotten just about all their permits. Josh Douglas actually told me about a month ago there's a fire permit. Apparently there's a town of Dover in which they may need a fire permit or other permit. But anyway, let me know how that call goes with Hanson and Graffia and Engelbright and Joshua Douglas. And I really appreciate, you know, I did FM radio for decades and AM radio for about a decade. This is not FM or AM. This is just my crazy little daily Facebook live stream. And you didn't have to humor me by taking an hour and a half out of your day. So I really appreciate it.
Hey, no, Joel, it's my pleasure, really. I remembered you from years back, and I'll do it anytime. Hey, Joshua, you're a fine audience. I'll do it just for one.
And,
my pleasure.
I'm going to try to do what I can here in Lake Oswego. You know, it's kind of a wealthy, people kind of turn up their noses a little bit too much. It's sort of an infamous little suburb of Portland. There's a lot of people sort of a little bit too much money, a little bit too arrogant. But I'm going to try to borrow or steal from your knowledge to try to push for a CCA here in Lake Oswego, Portlandia. So I'm going to keep on bugging you, sir.
Hey, right on. Anytime. Yeah, I've had a few contacts up there. If you get going, let me know. I can dig up whatever I know about it.
You know people in Portland, Oregon?
I've had some calls from Oregon. I don't remember who the hell it was, actually, because they never got it going, and I don't remember what happened. But there has been some action on CCA in Oregon. So good luck with it. Let me know. Keep in touch.
They have a green energy fund. The voters approved by referendum in the city of Portland like a year or two ago a tax on the big box stores to fund green energy. That may be the only place in the country they're doing that. But of course,
that's a good thing.
Not as good as your plan, of course.
That's a good thing that you could definitely build on that. You know, if you would, because that's the other piece. That's the finance piece, right? So you can build on that. But they've got, Portland General and interesting. Well, let me know what you find out as you dig into it. I'd love to keep abreast of that.
Amen. And Joshua notes in the chat section here that I'm invited to listen. He put in capital letters on our call.
Okay, very good.
Anyway, Paul, thank you very much for human.
Right.
Thank you for always
My pleasure.
I'll bug you later.
Okay, doke. Take care.
Bye.